Preparing for the president. All you need to know about Donald Trump's visit to Kansas City Tuesday, and he's not the only one in town. Have we ever been this popular? National news attention on the metro as 3 police officers are shot, plus in Kansas, has party lost its meaning? And anger and outrage, this time over trash and long, long lines.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Smithfield Foods, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nick Haynes, and thank you for joining us on the program that connects the dots on the news of the week in this place we call home. Rolling up their sleeves to tackle the week's top stories, Kansas City Star editorial page editor Colleen Nelson, who has covered plenty of presidential visits as a former White House correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. So is Michael Mahoney. He's the chief political reporter for KMBC 9 News. Also with us, the senior writer for the Call newspaper, Eric Wesson, and Star columnist and editorial writer Dave Helling. Kansas City preparing for the President of the United States. On Tuesday, Donald Trump heads into town. What will he be doing? Well, he'll be speaking at the National Veterans of Foreign Wars Convention at Bartle Hall, and he'll be hosting a fundraising luncheon for Missouri U.S. Senate candidate Josh Hawley. Last week, it was Vice President Mike Pence in Kansas City. And this week, Donald Trump Jr., Bernie Sanders, and the most celebrated new star of the Democratic Party, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, all campaigning for local candidates. Have we ever been this politically popular in Kansas City, Michael Mahoney?
Yes, we have been. And in fact, my partner here, Dave Helling, will ratify this. In the late 1980s and the early 90s, Missouri was a swing state. And so we got lots of presidential visits. Not so much during the primary, Dave, as I remember it, but the presidential campaigns had the candidates in here on a consistent basis in 88, 92, and 96, when this was what we now call a purple state. And to the point, it got to the point, I think Dave will ratify this with me here, covering the local campaigns became a problem because we had to stop everything that was happening and cover a presidential or a presidential candidate visit.
If I'm not a delegate at the Veterans for Foreign Wars Convention, Colleen Nelson, or I haven't given quite a bit of cash to the Josh Hawley campaign, will I have a chance to rub shoulders and see Donald Trump during his visit on Tuesday?
You will not. Nice try. If you write a big check to Josh Hawley, you can hang out with President Trump and maybe even take a photo with him if you write a bigger check. But President Trump isn't really inclined to make a lot of spontaneous stops. I would be surprised if we see him eating barbecue.
He's not going to be sneaking into Gates Barbecue down the street, Eric Wesson?
No, chances are he wouldn't. He won't be. It's interesting how this energy is coming up now, especially in the primary, when Josh Hawley hasn't even won the nomination yet.
Yeah, so he hasn't won the nomination yet, and yet the president there endorsing him. Will we likely see another kind of an endorsement from the president while he is here? For instance, in the Kansas governor's race?
No, I don't think he'll issue an endorsement in that primary. Of course, he'll endorse the Republican nominee at some point, one assumes. The interesting thing about Tuesday's visit will involve an endorsement, however, Nick, and that is the president's tweet this week with a hearty go at it to Kevin Yoder, who is the Republican congressman in the 3rd District of Kansas. That endorsement from the president is interesting to say the least because he didn't win that district, so it will be fascinating to see if Kevin Yoder shows up on Tuesday. And there's a bit of a, for the Trump visit, and there's a bit of a parallel quickly about this, Nick. Barack Obama came out for Robin Carnahan in her first campaign for the U.S. Senate and spent 2 days here, did all kinds of events, was down at the Folly Theater. There are Democrats who think now that was a mistake because Obama in his first years was not as popular as maybe he ended up being at the end, and that it might have actually hurt Carnahan statewide. Trump's visit, in terms of what it does for Yoder, is a problematic thing and will be fascinating to watch.
Well, he doesn't have the cachet of a president, but Bernie Sanders is in town Friday, along with the most celebrated new star of the Democratic Party, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who just ousted one of her party's top leaders in a New York congressional primary primary. They're appearing at the Reardon Center this Friday night for Brent Welder, who's running against Kansas Congressman Kevin Yoder. But he is one of 1,080 candidates. I'm only slightly exaggerating. But does this visit from two high-profile Democratic national stars at the same time take him over the top, Michael?
I don't know if it takes him over the top, but it does help him. Welder is leading in the fundraising, according to the latest reports. So he wins the money primary. Whether or not he wins the August primary, it remains to be seen. Welder is also a very progressive candidate, not the only progressive candidate in this field, but he shares the views with Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez on Medicaid for all, free tuition for college, a guaranteed job, whatever that means. So it's an application of progressive politics in Kansas, because Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez are also on Friday visiting Wichita for James Thompson, another candidate down there. See how it goes.
Well, Dave mentioned earlier that sometimes it can backfire when a big political name endorses you. Is there a backfiring that can take place if you're seen with Bernie Sanders and somebody who's also calling for there to be, we would be taking over airports and abolishing ICE?
Right. Well, there's absolutely a risk here. And so it's an interesting political calculation, because with 1,080 candidates in the Democratic primary, this helps separate Welder from the crowd by bringing the star power. But it's a swing district that Hillary Clinton won by 1 percentage point. And so this might help Welder in the primary when voters will be more liberal, but it could come back to haunt him if he makes it to the general, because Kevin Yoder will play Bernie Sanders footage over and over again.
Eric.
But it's interesting to me, will President Trump have a side effect with all the things that happened in Russia and meeting with the Russian president and inviting him to the country? Will he have a side effect on candidates in the Republican Party?
Will it, Michael?
It's hard to say right now. A couple of things to remember. Presidents have frequently come to VFW conventions to salute the VFW and veterans in general. That's something that Trump, the president, does a lot anyway. And then we'll have to see to what degree this is sort of whatever the standard stump speech is for President Trump, whether he rolls that out or it's another one of these rambling things like he did in the Dakotas a couple of weeks ago. So
will he stay on the stump?
Well, you know, there'll be a shout out to Hawley, Josh Hawley for sure. Perhaps Kevin Yoder vote Republican, and he'll probably defend the Helsinki summit as well.
You know, I noticed, well, we've been talking about Brent Welder, who's bringing in the top Democratic political names. This week, a Republican senator endorsing Welder's opponent, teacher Tom Neerman, and that endorsement not coming without a price. The Kansas State senator from Mission Hills, Barbara Bollier, has been stripped of her leadership roles in Topeka, and there's now an effort to oust her. You can see why Republicans would be angry at her. How unusual is it for an elected leader to endorse someone from the opposite party, Colleen?
It's unusual. You don't see this a lot, and you particularly don't see it a lot at this hyper-partisan moment, but it's disappointing that apparently you have to march in lockstep with the party on absolutely everything, or else you'll be punished, potentially ousted, stripped of your leadership roles, and have all the money taken away.
But party does mean something, and if she's going to be not only supporting one of the leading Republican candidates for Congress in Kansas, but also a Democrat, or Democratic candidate rather, also going to be switching parties to potentially voting for a Democrat for governor as well. Why doesn't she just leave the Republican Party and become a Democrat herself?
Well, it's because she votes her district, which is Fairway, and Mission Hills is full of moderate Republicans. I am immediately reminded, however, the Missouri Democrats went through this very same thing of trying to throw somebody out of their caucus down in Jeff City this past session, when there was a fellow, a St. Louis representative, who appeared on a very conservative talk show over there on a regular basis, and Democrats were trying to throw him out of their caucus. So this is not solely a Republican throw the infidels out. Democrats have done it too.
Mike, Dave.
It is not unique, and you will hear members of both parties saying, why doesn't Senator Bollier just simply become a Democrat? But party discipline is always loose in the United States, and you're kind of free to call yourself whatever you want to call yourself and edit and register in Kansas in whichever party. So I don't think there's a long-lasting change coming to Kansas politics. It is interesting that she endorsed a candidate in the primary and not in the general election. as well. That suggests that she may want to be more intimately involved in Democratic policies than not.
Well, Chris Kobach benefited this week from Donald Trump Jr., who made his second visit to the Sunflower State to support his campaign for the Republican nomination for governor.
If I look at any sort of measurement, we are much better off as a country than we were 4 years ago.
Amen.
It all happens in the same week as the NRA announces it's endorsing Kobach's opponent, sitting Governor Jeff Collier. Which is better to have in a candidate's pocket, the Trump family or the NRA, Eric?
Ooh, headshot, gut shot, they both hurt. Probably in his case, it probably would be the Trump people, simply because they have that charisma and they talk those dog whistle politics that people in that district probably want to hear.
It is interesting in this where the NRA had actually given a higher rating to Chris Kobach prior to this, an A+, Jeff Collier only an A, and yet they endorse Jeff Collier. Does this make a mockery of the endorsement process, Colleen?
Well, it raises some questions. I mean, is the NRA making a political calculation here? Are they trying to game out who the winner of the primary is going to be and thinking that Collier is going to emerge as the winner, so they endorsed him? But I don't think it's going to have a big impact because Kobach's credentials on gun rights are not in question. I mean, this guy shows up with a replica machine gun to every parade, and he got the endorsement of Gun Owners of America, which he was quick to say. So it's not as if anyone doubts that Kobach is dedicated to gun rights.
Michael.
When he was in Johnson County, the day that this happened, or the day after it, Kobach seemed to shrug it off. He said, look, you know, everybody knows where I am on the Second Amendment. I've got the Gun Rights Owners of America. I've got the Kansas chapter of the NRA. They gave me a survey. We're just going to be fine on this. So surprising, and I agree with you. They probably made a political calculation. That's what Kobach claims, that it was the NRA's incumbent insurance policy or something like that that motivated them to go for Collier, who's the incumbent governor.
Yeah, he's sitting governor.
Two big stories in our region bring national news attention to our area. Just to our south, more than a dozen tourists lose their lives when a Ride the Ducks boat capsizes in choppy waters on Table Rock Lake just outside of Branson. And closer to home, 3 Kansas City police officers shot in the line of duty.
The thin blue line bleeding red tonight as separate shootings in 2 states cost 1 officer his life and sent 3 others to the hospital.
Chaos in Kansas City. We're following breaking news of 3 Kansas City police officers shot in the line of duty.
This latest assault on police comes after the Metro has been hit in the last 2 years by a string of police officer deaths. So are police officers more at risk than ever before? Well, we took a look through the statistics, and remarkably, it shows that law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty is actually close to a 50-year low. That's definitely not what we'd think from what's happening locally, right, Colleen?
That's right, but it's worth noting that Kansas City is still one of the most violent cities in the country. I mean, our murder rate is very high, and so I guess it stands to reason that you would see some violence against police officers. It's worth noting also on those numbers, last year the numbers were much lower for police officer deaths, but it's not necessarily a trend just yet. It was 1 year, and so the question is whether that decline will continue.
No, that story happened earlier in the week, and something I added to the agenda this week was actually relating to the dismantling of the Verrucht at Schlitterborn. I removed that from the agenda when you see 13 people dying on another attraction just south of us on Table Rock Lake. You were actually just in Branson on the Ride the Ducks with your family, Eric.
Yes, this past weekend we were there. It's really tragic because they had told us, you know, when you get on there, the life jackets are in the overhead part of the duck, and they said in 49 years they'd never had an incident, but they showed us how to put the life jackets on. And then to see this, they said it was a 60-mile-an-hour gust of wind that came by, capsized the boat, and it sank. But it really, really is tragic that 13 people have lost their lives, and probably some children were in that number as well. I don't think they've released anything yet, but probably some children, because there's a lot of children like that ride.
Dave.
Yeah, the investigation, of course, is just underway, Nick, and the reporting is just getting underway. Journalists are now trying to understand precisely what happened on Table Rock Lake. We'll be looking at a lot of things. Who's required to inspect these boats? What did those inspections show? Are duck boats inherently dangerous? What about the weather? What about the training for the people driving the boats? What instructions were given to the passengers before this particular boat left the dockside? Should these boats be permitted on lakes as big as Table Rock? There's some suggestion that maybe the waves can be higher on bigger lakes and are inherently more dangerous for crafts like this. Reporters are on the case, and these questions will have to be answered, and my guess, just like Schlitterbahn, the Missouri legislature will be forced to address these questions as well as perhaps the federal government, since the Coast Guard plays such a significant role.
I want to go back because I didn't know this about Eric, and we've been friends for years. You were in the Marines, and
yes.
Tell us a little bit about the fact that when an incident like this happens and a vessel capsizes, there's obviously chaos, but there's confusion underwater.
Yeah, when you go in, because part of the training in the Marine Corps, they put you in this capsule, shoot you in the water, it turns upside down. You get very disoriented because you don't know which way is up because you've spun. And so we had to make flotation devices out of our clothes just to stay afloat, but you get very disoriented with that, and it's if those things with the top on it turned upside down and you're in there, you don't know whether you're going up or out the side, or you should go through the bottom. But chances are you could have gone through the window, but it all happens so fast, and if it takes on a lot of water real fast, then it's really an issue. Let me just say this: when we were on there, you got a guy that drives the boat on the land, and then you have somebody that's certified, and he was retired from the Coast Guard, that actually drives the boat in the water. So I don't know what happened with that. It's just a tragedy. Really.
The Star has already reported, Nick, that the canopy, which is over the top of this so-called duck boat, may have actually hindered the ability to get out. The Coast Guard in 2000 issued a report which said that canopy should be easily detached in a simple motion, or the boat should be open. One of the things we'll want to know is, was this canopy attached too tightly or in a way that made it difficult to get it off the boat? I mean, there are enormous questions that are going to have to be answered. My guess is all the duck boats will shut down for a while until some of those issues are addressed.
When you get on that duck boat, you should have a life jacket on. That should be step one. Even though you're on the lane,
which is not the case now.
It's not the case. They don't tell you about the life jackets until you're getting ready to go into the water.
Thank you for that. Well, some people worry about big political questions like Russia, shrinking ice caps, the sanctity of the Second Amendment, the state of democracy. Let's not forget that for many of us, it's the meat and potatoes, small stuff affecting our lives right now, right in front of us, that matters most. Why isn't my trash being picked up? Why did I have to wait 4 hours to get my driver's license renewed? All questions we're hearing about from our viewers this week. Is there no one picking up trash anymore in Kansas City, John writes? Guys, this is a basic city service and needs to be done each week without fail. If you can't get this done, then you have no business trying to do other things. It's the same sentiment we're hearing about on the Kansas side from people facing massive lines, waiting to get their driver's licenses renewed. Cynthia writes, in 20 years, I've never been turned away trying to renew my driver's license. You were on the case on that this week, Michael. She says, this is ridiculous. Who needs to be voted out of office over this? Those are strong words, but I mean, is anyone specifically responsible?
The Department of Revenue runs the driver's license offices for the state of Missouri. The state of Kansas, thanks. The counties run the DMV, where you get your tags and your registration. The state of Kansas went to a new system just 2 years ago, and it's not working well. And they acknowledge it's not working well. And now, with the long lines, they're saying we'll get right to it. Maybe we'll add a third station. My point here is, it's that sort of stuff, not getting the garbage picked up or not being in a prompt line or timely getting your driver's license, that really tick voters off. And this is the kind of thing that could pop up, especially in the late stages of this Kansas gubernatorial primary, and have an impact. I mean, this is not esoteric policy stuff. This is, as you said, meat and potatoes.
Yeah, it's the Chicago rule. If you recall, they had a problem getting the snow off the streets many years ago, and Jane Byrne was elected mayor as a result because people were so irate about this basic service. The biggest problem in Kansas, other than the change in the rules or the provider of the inline service, is they only have 2 offices in Johnson County for 600,000 residents. That's absurd. We wrote that this week. There is an effort to get a third office open quickly and perhaps permanently going forward.
And they have expanded the hours, so they now open on Monday, expanded hours on Saturday.
They were closed on Monday. Think about that for a minute. This basic service that the state requires you to obtain, a driver's license, is closed on Mondays. That just seems like beyond the pale. I would say quickly, Nick, one of the problems is hiring enough people. And in a time of full employment, this is one of the problems with trash removal as well. It's harder to find enough people to get those
talking about Trash Missouri, that was on the Missouri side, and there were 6,000 complaints just in the Northland alone about failure to pick up trash, sometimes for up to 3 weeks. What is happening there? Is there anything new compared to what we've heard in the past about trash problems?
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The city councilman there says he's working to get to the bottom of this, and he wants to review the contract, and perhaps will change the routes and assign fines if trash doesn't get picked up. But I mean, to the earlier point, I mean, this is the basic blocking and tackling of government. And when trash doesn't get picked up, and particularly when trash doesn't get picked up in the middle of July, which is a bad time of year to have trash sitting around and smelling up the neighborhood, I mean, this is what infuriates people. They're living this. So, I mean, this is what gets folks voted out of office pretty quickly.
I can tell you firsthand that people are furious in the Northland about this for the very reason, Colleen, that you mentioned. The garbage is stinking up the neighborhoods when they're out there, you know.
In the heat.
In the cases that I know about, it's for another 24 hours, perhaps 48. But it doesn't matter when it's 90 degrees. It can get odoriferous.
So trash and long lines to get a driver's license are pesky problems around our metro. But for some people, there are more basic concerns. Will I have a roof over my head tonight?
Roughly 9,000 eviction cases are filed in Jackson County every year. If 9,000 people had measles, we would declare an epidemic, stop everything else, and marshal all of our resources.
But let's be honest, some people want it to be like this.
This is about largely race, living around low-income people. Who's going to be around you?
The tenant can be represented by Lee Bailey and Alan Dershowitz, but if he hasn't paid the rent, he's going to be evicted.
Join us right after Ruckus Thursday night at 7:30 as we search for solutions to the housing squeeze in Kansas City. Now, what other issues are on people's minds this week? 10 months after voters approved a new-look KCI at the ballot box, has the final hurdle blocking construction finally been overcome? You may not be aware of it, but for the better part of a year now, there's been a dispute over who will build the new $1 billion plus airport terminal. Labor groups have insisted the job be 100% union, but there's been concerns that would limit minority contractors and women-owned firms who are less likely to be unionized. Who won out, and why should we care, Eric?
Well, the city won because they got the no strike clause. Minority businesses, women-owned businesses won as well because now they don't have to join the union to be a part of a project that in most cases they voted to support. So I think in the end that they won. Edgemoor won, of course, because now they can focus on other things. The union kind of saved face on the heels of Proposition A coming up, so now they can look kind of like good guys and how they work with the community to get it resolved.
So it's not going to be 100% union labor in working on constructing this new airport terminal, Michael?
No, it's going to be 95% organized labor, 5% of these other groups. And so I will add, Eric, to your winners list, organized labor. They wanted 100% of that project. It wasn't ever going to happen. They got 95% of it. That's a good chunk of that loaf. And the mayor now believes the last big obstacle in terms of moving ahead with this project is now resolved. We'll see. Let's see where, just like a house, the city and the developers still have to close on their final agreement on it. That is expected to happen later this fall. When that happens, that's when we'll learn out what the cost is expected to be, when it will really open. Right now they're saying the fall of 2022. When they finally close on the house, literally, that's when we're going to get these answers.
Was that the final hurdle then, Dave?
It was a huge hurdle, and it had been a problem for many, many months. So we've written about it a lot in the newspaper. Quick thing, though, Nick, the hiring of minorities to actually work on this project, known as workforce, is still unresolved. This is just minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses who could, of course, employ Caucasians. So there will still be a bit of an argument over what are the goals for the actual number of minorities and women who work on the project. But it is a good step toward getting this project done, and it kind of puts everything back on track.
And I think they have to wait for the final numbers from the last report to come down, disparity study, to come out to determine what those numbers for the workforce could be.
Yeah, right now it is a tentative agreement.
The World Cup may have just ended, but local leaders want you to remain fired up. This week, Kansas City releases its official video to promote our metro as a site for the 2026 World Cup. The video claims hosting a match in KC could mean hundreds of millions of dollars for the local economy. 4 years ago, Kansas City was hyping a different video, arguing Kansas City would be the best place in the galaxy to host the Republican National Convention. I bring it up because this week, Charlotte is picked to host the 2020 GOP convention. Did Kansas City even bid on it this time around, or have they decided they no longer want to be in the political convention business, Colleen?
Kansas City doesn't seem that interested in being in the political convention business at this point. It's really interesting. The World Cup is a far more appealing target at this point, and I think a number of cities are, like Kansas City, are taking a look at what it takes to put on a political convention at this point, and just the logistics of dealing with protesters and security concerns and the huge perimeter they create around a political convention that really just cripples a city. And I think a lot of cities are saying, we'll just take a pass on that. That doesn't really appeal to us, and it's not really going to help us that
Very
much.
quickly, I reported this back in March. Kansas City was invited to bid on the Republican convention and specifically said, no, we're not interested. The Democrats didn't even try. We don't have enough hotel rooms for a bigger convention.
And that is our Week in Review. Our thanks to our news reviewers from the Kansas City Star, Colleen Nelson, and from the Call, Eric Wesson. From KMBC 9 News, Michael Mahoney, and the Star's Dave Helling. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at KCPT, thanks for spending part of your weekend with us.